It's the 4th of July, and I'm here in Randolph, Vermont, a town known for a horse breeder named Justin Morgan, its history with wood and the mills that served as a foundation for the town's economy, and for being smack dab in the middle of the state of Vermont, which was the first state in America to abolish slavery. This is also where I grew up. I'm surrounded by a sea of white faces here in Randolph, and this doesn't surprise me much. The decennial census lists only 19 people as, quote, Black or African American alone, end quote, in the town, and 20 as, quote, white and Black or African American, end quote, with a solid 0 for other multiracial groups. 0. And if I'm honest, this data seems a little off to me. There aren't many of us who came from here or stayed here, certainly, but I can already think of more than 39 of us who have dotted the high school and theater in town over recent years. So either the census simply doesn't have the tools to measure such a small population in this rural New England town, which happens sometimes, or maybe, and this is just my guess, some folks don't feel free here to check the black box, to identify as themselves. The irony of Independence Day, for me, is and always has been palpable. The pomp and circumstance around the history we choose to celebrate and remember is glaring up against the backdrop of a history we choose to forget. And I think there's only one thing more ironic than being in a state as homogenous as Vermont, the first to abolish slavery, on Independence Day. One thing. And that would be freedom itself. Because freedom is inherently unfree. It's something to be defended, fought for, stood up for. It's been hard won in a lot of our history. You can't totally own your own freedom because one person relishing in freedom typically takes some freedom from someone else. And freedom is so elusive. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it isn't even an option. So, what is freedom? How do you know when you have it? What does it sound like?
KidsBowlFree.com. Get your kids signed up. They can bowl 2 free games every single day, all summer long. Every day, for free. KidsBowlFree.com. Get them signed up.
Today, I'm on another kind of ironic mission to capture freedom. In sound, anyway. By seeking out BIPOC strangers and their family members to ask them a simple question on the street. What makes you feel free?
What makes me feel free?
We'll see if we get some simple answers. From Vermont Public, this is Homegoings. I'm Myra Flynn, and today we're hoping to create a little cognitive dissonance on purpose between the sounds of freedom and the reality of it.
There's a lot of unjust authority out there. And, there's a lot of people with a lot more power than I have.
As I mentioned, some of these thoughts on freedom were captured during the Randolph, Vermont 4th of July parade, and others just a couple days prior in Burlington, Vermont. All are being used as a sort of stitching between the quilt squares of a deeper conversation with a guy named Speech, lead MC and singer of the band Arrested Development. And he is fighting for freedom in his own way by simply being at home.
I purposely wanted to live in the rural South, and that's where I live.
This is Homegoings, and in this episode, we ask, what makes you feel free? We're a proud member of the NPR network. Welcome home.
Hey, it's Royalton Jewels, LLC. We welcome Royalton Jewels to the parade this day. And hey, we gotta tell you, we need some sunglasses.
What makes you feel free?
What makes me feel free? To be honest, when I'm in the river or in any body of water and I'm there and I'm in the water and the sun is shining, and that's what makes me feel free. When I have nothing material in me and I just have nature.
So just like naked in the river.
Yes, makes me feel very free.
Okay, now I am going to fangirl for just a minute. Something that makes me feel free is your music.
Go ahead, man.
My babysitter gave me a mixtape that had Arrested Development on it for the first time. That's when I heard you, and I just found that mixtape recently. And just feeling like, oh, this is so good.
$2 means a snack for me, but it means a big deal to you. Be strong, serve God only. Know that if you do, beautiful heaven awaits. Esther pulled my rope for the first time. I saw a man with no clothes, no money, no plate, Mr. Winter.
If you can't already tell by this classic song, the music you're hearing is by the band Arrested Development. And I'm talking with Speech, lead singer, co-founder, and pioneer of the band that was and still remains my personal soundtrack to freedom. In the early 90s, when the band came out, there wasn't anything out there quite like them. They took conscious hip-hop to a whole new level, weaving politics, activism, and spiritual awareness into the then hardcore rap and slow jam R&B mainstream. And as far as their presentation, well, let's just say there wasn't any confusion about their investment in representation. Donned in kufis and kente cloth, rocking twists and faux locks long before rocking natural hair even felt permissive to some of us, this band looked black, sounded black, and unapologetically talked about being black in their songs.
I strut through the ghetto. The rain this time I feel is mental. The goal of this rain I feel is spiritual. Saw through the eyes of the inflicted people. The eyes are
You all were kind of the first to let me know in a lot of ways that like being pro-black and being outward about that wasn't something that you had to like sneak in, subliminally into music. You could just say it proudly. That made me feel very free as an artist and as a black woman. And I just wonder, it felt like you all were pioneering that feeling and that freedom to just say that, to say we are black and we're proud in music. How did you all get so free to feel like you could do that?
There's a lot of catalysts and inspirations. KRS-One, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, Jungle Brothers, De La Soul. A lot of these artists were inspiring to me, but they all had sort of their particular road that they traveled down, but also their particular backgrounds. So for me, as a guy that was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who had the most, it's known as one of the worst places to live as a Black person in the United States. And it also has a very stark difference between Black life and white life in Milwaukee. If anybody ever visits Milwaukee, it's one of the more beautiful cities in the nation. And yet the Black neighborhoods and the Black sides of town, you could see a stark poverty and feeling of, just being oppressed. And then you could go to the white sides of town and it's almost storybook. And so I grew up in that reality of Milwaukee. And then I come to Atlanta in 1987.
If you haven't been to Atlanta, Georgia, know this. It is a city that is the definition of racial nuance. Since the 1970s, it's been nicknamed the Black Mecca of the South because, to quote Ebony magazine, Black folks have more, live better, accomplish more, and deal with whites more effectively than they do anywhere else in the South or North. End quote. In my experience, Atlanta is where I like to visit when I need a reminder that Black people, my people, were once kings and queens. For instance, when you say yes to a dinner invite from Black folks in Atlanta, you better come correct with your outfit because chances are your GPS is taking you to some mansion somewhere. And when you go to get your hair done, know that human hair is the default extension to your braids. The food is refined and soulful. The music is classic and completely innovative. Most Black kids I know from the city went to private school, and pretty much every house I've been to has a Steinway grand piano, whether anyone knows how to play it or not. This is to say that Black people in Atlanta are known to be affluent, powerful policymakers, leaders in art and culture, and just overall killing the game. This is not a city where overt oppression reigns. So, for Speech, who came here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a city that continues to be one of the most racially segregated cities in America due to a fraught 20th century history with redlining, Atlanta, Georgia, felt about as free to him as, well, a white person likely feels in New England.
And Atlanta was like a little Africa to me. And it was very, like Blacks were thriving here in a way that I hadn't seen before. You know, I go to certain neighborhoods and there was whole upper middle class Black neighborhoods where everyone seemed to be doing well. It's like all these doctors, lawyers, you know, numerous different professions, but people were doing well. And I was like, I've never seen this before. And so I had a lot of different sort of data points that I was pulling from, you know, as just a man and as an artist. And also I connected with a community of activists here in Atlanta, where's these African drummers and dancers and philosophers and spiritualists. And it was just an eye-opening experience for me where I was like, wow, you know, there is a whole beauty and philosophy and spirituality to Blackness that I had never really been exposed to through schooling, living in America, and through television and documentaries and all that. I just never been schooled to it. So I was just an open sponge.
I have one answer.
What makes you feel free?
I feel free when I can be everything that I am at every space that I'm in.
What does that look like? What how would I know if you were doing that?
I don't think it's anything you can know. I think it's only something that I can know. I think it's just about like, you know, when I feel free, I feel like there's no source of like attack that's going to be coming at me, you know, so I can be as open and honest about all the things I believe and care about. So for me, that doesn't happen all the time.
Why not?
There's a lot of unjust authority out there. And, you know, there's a lot of people with a lot more power than I have. And it's a difficult time to express views that are, you know, there's really a lot of polarization right now. And it's hard to even have a discussion with someone that has a different view without it escalating to attacks of some kind, be verbal or more than that.
So like safety, it sounds like, makes you feel free.
I think that's a good way to sum it up.
What makes you feel free?
A lot makes me feel free, but I also think that freedom is a really never ending, changing definition when you live in a country or also just on the world right now. I think that freedom is being able to wake up every day and keep persisting and living as an individual. Like, there's so much in the world that is working against everybody's happiness, especially for marginalized folks. I happen to be Black and queer and an immigrant. There are a lot of different parts of individuality outside of just like the system that is set up, like the economic system that is set up around us that is working against us. So freedom can really be just waking up and breathing every day. It's walking out your door and having a meal with some friends. It's being able to live your life despite everything in the world that is working against you to do otherwise.
As Speech says, he leaned into every delicious morsel of the freedom he felt in Atlanta and put it to good use. And part of his journey toward accepting the beautiful and free-feeling place his spirit is living now was taking a long, hard look at his past generational trauma to try to learn more about the beauty in all of that.
I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of Black parents, in my days at least, were trying to figure out what's the best way to move forward. They had already been fighting for rights. They'd, seen segregation and deep, overt oppression. And they were trying to figure out, how do we raise these kids? Do we try to incorporate them into the bigger society? Do we tell them about all the trauma and the pain and just the hurts of our history? Or do we try to see what they could do in a different direction? And I think my parents had that dilemma. They were trying to figure it out. But when I started realizing it from these groups and from living in Atlanta, that, there is this whole world of Black beauty, history, dignity, pride, joy, I realized that they had it all around me the whole time. And then I started having great conversations with my parents, and I started to find who I was. And I started to understand better, like, who my grandmother was as an activist, which I didn't see her that way. I just saw her as my loving, amazing grandmother from Tennessee, and who my grandmother was from East St. Louis. I started to see her as the activist and the strong woman that she was, as opposed to just my amazing grandmother from East St. Louis. And so anyway, things just started to be uncovered for me. And that's what you're starting to hear on our debut album. It's 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life of. You're hearing this young guy who's realizing for the first time who he is and where he comes from and the beauty of all that.
Now that you stand so firmly in your Blackness and have a career where you have said stuff that sometimes people were too afraid to say, and you've become successful off of that bravery, it seems like there's nothing that could ever make you feel mentally held down or held back or less free. But I could be wrong. Is there anything that makes you feel in shackles or, quieter or dampens your spirit?
Oh, definitely. On a daily and possibly hourly basis. Yes, definitely. So it doesn't mean that there's not times, like right at this very moment, that I feel absolutely free, right? And but there is also things, to give you an example, and this is just a random example. So yesterday, I was at Clark Atlanta University. It's one of our Black colleges, universities here in Atlanta. And I was going to see an incredible, wonderful speaker named Anthony Browder. Anthony Browder is a activist, author. He's become an archaeologist, where he is the only Black or person of African descent to actually do excavations in Egypt. And he uncovered tombs and worship centers, temples in the 25th dynasty era of Egypt. And anyway, an amazing, deeply knowledgeable man. And someone that actually was one of the catalysts to me wanting to do Arrested Development. So anyway, I go to see him speak, and I wanted to meet him for the first time. So I got a chance to do that. And we're on this college campus, and it's probably about 10 people to watch him speak. This man has done things that he studied things that for 45 years straight, he studied things that he knows more about it than most people could ever even dream of knowing. And yet there was 10 people to see him, all Black. That's just yesterday, and it's just one moment in life. It's like, oh yeah, you know, we still have a lot to accomplish. And yet I don't want to say that like we haven't accomplished a lot. We have. Just me talking about his life and what he's been able to accomplish is amazing. But the fact that most people, most of your listeners likely won't know who he is also sad, because he's done so much incredible work. So that's just one example of many things that I could share.
I hadn't heard of Tony Browder. I wonder if some of you have. And I totally get what Speech is saying here about how damaging it is to Black freedom to have your history erased or untold, or in this case, to have your own people not even know it exists. This being said, I'm feeling like I still haven't heard from Speech, the man, about what makes him feel free. It makes me wonder if his lack of freedom is showing here, in his lack of answering. So, one thing I notice when I interview Black men is that I'll ask a question about themselves and like their heart and like what makes them feel something. And often I'll end up with a kind of a story about someone else. So I'm just observing and listening deeply and wondering, for you, do you still have moments where you don't feel free?
Wow, that was deep. You just hit me with that's deep. I've never even thought about what you just said. Wow.
What makes you feel free?
I wish for everybody to experience freedom, but I know not everyone will.
It's a little fighter jet.
Yeah, I think of it kind of like the analogy of all the starfish that are washed up on the shore, and the kid starts throwing all of them back, and somebody says, hey, you can't save all of them. He says, well, I can save some of them. And, you know, I think that, I don't know, I just thought about Harriet Tubman, thinking about that, because I think she understood that she wasn't going to free everyone, but she wanted to free as many people as she could. And with me being a personal trainer, mentor, it is part of my daily responsibility to help free people. And I think with some of that freedom does come a level of responsibility, but it is a responsibility, I believe, that is towards a good, and that is towards freeing other people.
You know, for me personally, I live in a primarily white neighborhood. I live in a gorgeous, natural, rural area called Fayetteville, Georgia. I live on 11 acres of land, and I'm looking at right now a gorgeous lake. The lake is literally part of my land, and it's part of my backyard. But my neighbors are all, I would say 85% white. When I moved here, I was the only Black man that lived in this neighborhood. And there is racism and reminders of my lack of freedom that happens to me pretty frequently as I sort of move through the spaces that I move in the rural South. Friends of mine that, you know, come to visit me are often, you know, stopped by my neighbors and asked, what are you doing here? Do you belong here? Things of this nature. And I have to deal with these things and write letters to my neighbors and find out who did it and rebuke them and teach them and help them to understand what's not proper about that. Have these kinds of discussions. You know, my land that I live on, my daughter is building a tiny house on this property, and my neighbors will tell on us and will actually successfully stop us from building on our property, and things that have absolutely nothing to do with them, they have tried to impede our progress. And so we're fighting in court to try to, go forward with the building and things of this nature. And when we try to find the right lawyers and try to find the right things that we need in order to move forward with the building, we often have to deal with the old school people that live in this area. And we have to try to figure out how to navigate and maneuver around the racism that unfortunately exists with how they view this area of town and what rights do we have to be in it. So those are just a few more real life examples of how I know that freedom is still, something that I yearn for in its totality.
I'm not totally surprised to hear this, even though earlier we talked about Atlanta being nicknamed the Black Mecca, because outside of Atlanta is the rest of Georgia, a state that has some of the most nightmarish stories of racism in places like Forsyth County, where in 1912 white mobs set fire to Black churches and Black-owned businesses as a form of racial cleansing, eventually driving more than 1,100 Black residents out of the county altogether. But Georgia is also the state where the civil rights movement took root in the late 1940s, led by fed-up and righteous religious clergymen, students, and soldiers returning from World War II, demanding equal, or at least livable, treatment. So say what you want about Georgia. This movement, albeit far from over in many ways, did provoke a culture shift in the treatment, education, and desegregation of the South and beyond. This is why I use the word nuanced about the state of Georgia. It has a unique history of containing both pain and purpose within its boundaries, which is cool to read about and learn about and visit. But to live on that fault line, as my mom likes to say, it's not for civilians. So speech is a kind of soldier in a way, fighting for freedom by way of habitation.
I purposely wanted to live in the rural South, and that's where I live. This is why I moved here, is to feel that freedom, to feel that connection to earth and to God and to what's real and what is lasting, because so many things are temporary. A lot of the things we're facing in this particular era of time. Our ancestors faced wholly different things. And the ancestors way, way, way before them faced wholly different things as well. So many things are temporary, but what are the things that are more lasting is the things that I chose. Like for me, being in this nature environment, like you said, it was a trade-off. I understood the realities of being out here in this era that we're living in, but I also understand the beauty and the power of nature. And it's a lot of what I talk about in our songs and in our music. But yeah, for me, that's the continuum that I wanted to tap into. And that's what brings me peace and brings me freedom. There's a song by a group that I produced called Gumbo. And there's a song called A Free Soul. And I wish this album would have blew up because it's such a beautiful song. My wife and I recite these lyrics probably once a week. My wife, daughter, and son and I actually all recite these lyrics. And it's beautiful days, beautiful nights. I love to see todays and I love to see tonights. I love seeing tomorrow after living through yesterday. And we pushed to get out of the cave. Once in a rage, but now I turn the page. Now that my mind is free, I live life positively. No one can hold me, and no one can lock me down from my history or put me in misery. Winds are blowing, trees are growing, earth I'm inhaling, and life I am loving. Energy flowing all through the mind of me. From elders to youngsters to spirits, it makes me feel free. I walk the long route, the short route I don't take, just so I can think of all the things I appreciate. Just so I can think of all the things I appreciate. I love feeling free.
The ability to dress and style myself however I please, whether that be in more masculine-leaning clothes or more feminine-leaning clothes, or just combining the two together, it makes me feel very true to the nature of who I am, which is just this amorphous being of the gender spectrum. And getting to walk about and live that freely throughout Vermont is really freeing.
The people who get to be free versus the people who work to be free is a very big divide that I hope that we are all working every day to close as much as we can. But I think for most people it is a work to be there and not necessarily a natural given right, unfortunately.
What makes you feel free?
Money.
Money? Why money? What do you mean?
I mean that I don't want to sound superficial or anything, but money allows you to go anywhere, do anything, just lots of options, and I like options in my life.
What makes you feel free?
Freedom.
Freedom makes you feel free? What is freedom to you?
Nature.
What about nature makes you feel free?
Every nature.
Yeah? Is it like being in the trees or the grass?
And all the nature.
Even the snow?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What makes you feel free?
That I don't have to be married as a woman.
It's the Chandler Youth production, The Little Mermaid Youth Theater, made in the USA.
That's a good answer.
We welcome the cast and producers and the helpers of The Little Mermaid under the sea.
This isn't a good answer.
That's such a good answer. I have to ask, are you married?
I am, by choice, because I wanted to be, not because I have to be.
I love that answer.
And I'll divorce his ass if I want to. Be just fine.
This is a free moment. I remember this specifically. This is during the days when people were kids were rocking Jordans, you needed your Timbs, whatever. So you show up to school every day, man, through the metal detector, right? No matter who you were, through the metal detector. Then there were days, though, this is when I felt absolutely free. There were days I would show up at school wearing a suit. Guess what? I didn't have to walk through the metal detector.
Todd Speech Thomas, thank you for your time today, unpacking your southern, rural, musical feelings of freedom. And speaking of rural, thank you to the folks who put on the Randolph, Vermont 4th of July parade. I hadn't been to one in years, and wow, that was a heck of a celebration. Thank you also to all the folks who lent me your stories of freedom on the spot. Avalon and Phil Wills, Lemua Suma, Kelly Robin, Jerome Allen, Nicholas, Alicia Taylor, Marlon Fisher, Leanne Santiago, Drew Davis, Lisa, Patty, and Ava. Thank you also to my now friend and then babysitter, Jody Carmen, for the mixtape and ultimate introduction to Arrested Development. As mentioned, I found it at my mom's house recently, and there's a picture of it up on our website at homegoings.co. Check it out if you want to indulge in a little nostalgia. This episode was mixed by me with help from our associate producer, James Stewart. Also with reporting support from our data journalist, Corey Doxer, and some field reporting by Nathaniel Wilson and Bryant Denton. I composed our theme music, all other music by Arrested Development and the band Gumbo, also Blue Dot Sessions. Saeed Tijan Thomas Jr. edits our show, and Zoe McDonald is the graphic artist behind our Homegoings artist portrait. Speech is front and center on this one, looking ironically patriotic, so check it out at homegoings.co. See you in 2 weeks for another episode of Homegoings, where we'll take a live interview we released in video back in June called Ask Me Anything and turn it into a podcast. A vodcast, if you will. It features myself and our show's editor, Saeed, and yes, we do ask each other pretty much anything and everything, so get ready. In the meantime, here on the show, we do our best to save time for a deep listen to a work of art by one of our artists on the show. Today, that artist is Speech and his full band Arrested Development, and we'll play out the full song we've already teased called Reigning Revolution. The song came out in 1992, and what can I say? It makes me feel free. How about you? As always, you are welcome here.
This is Headliner from Arrested Development, and I come here tonight to give thanks to the rain. So brothers and sisters, please put down your umbrellas. You won't be needing those today. Look to the clouds with the most rain coming from it. For without the rain, there's no me and there's no you. I said a drip drop, a drip drop, drip drop. Bum, 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 bum. Drip drop. Ah, let it rain, let God's water feed me, the water of life. Mentally rinsing me, physically drenching me, most are frowning upon your arrival, but I need you for survival. And when you follow my community, I run outside to properly greet you. Let it rain, take my pain, I'm glad to meet you. Fill my eyes with a colorful rainbow. Every drop that hits me fills me with unimmeasurable amount of security, knowing my God acknowledges me as if each drop of rain is aimed toward me. My Lord, thanks for life. My Lord, thanks for life. Thanks for my rain. It's raining revolution. It's raining solution. It's raining revolution. 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 I strut through the ghetto. The rain this time I feel is mental. The goal of this rain I feel is spiritual. Saw through the eyes of the inflicted people. The eyes are hard as a million tombstones, marked with the names of the millions of kin thrown to the dust that gave them their colored skin. Fade to black is the scene they're embalmed in. The rain many nights have witnessed her receiving the sperm of a brother into a sister, and blessed that life to guaranteed existence. A conscious baby for a black resistance. I feel the rain enhances a revolution. It reminds us of a spiritual solution. It reminds us of an unnatural, supernatural solution. It's raining revolution. 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 Lost between reality and psychology. 1990s mentality is described by the honorable truth message, which is true knowledge is so priceless, which is so true. Rain, stay here. Woo! Love that power. Brothers and sisters, ha ha! Raise your hands up high and let me see the colors of your beautiful skin. Now the ceremony begins. Lord, let the heavenly rain cleanse. Run into your nearest rainbow to grab hold, to ride on each color, learning the importance of each color. Oh yeah. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain. Ah. Yes. Let it rain, let it rain. Woo! Let it rain. Oh yeah. Let it rain. Let it rain. Yeah. Oh, let it rain. Oh, let it rain. Yeah.